Okay. Okay, then hello everyone that is going to be listening to this podcast. This is a podcast for the Iltir Tech, that it's a program that we're running inside Balkar Earth. And what we're looking for to wander around, it's how to face the different challenges that our rural regions are approaching. And in this case, we have Isabel Carlisle from Bioregional Learning Center, that she has like a long background on bioregions and working with people in a participatory way to deal with territorial or land challenges. And we want to ask her some questions to see if we can put some light also, and some inspiration for the local governments in Catalonia to be able to face some of the challenges, specifically to water, that we have these days. Hello, Isabel. How are you?
Hello, Oscar. I'm really well. It's very good to be with you.
It's always nice to see you. One of the first questions I would like to ask is, it seems that by regions it's starting to become like a topic, like people are starting to talk about it much more. Which do you think it's the potential of approaching our challenges from a bioregioning perspective?
I think it's got huge potential. Maybe I should explain what a bioregion is before I launch into what I think the potential is. So a bioregion is not defined politically. It's an area of land, a region, which is defined geologically, geographically, by land use, by soil type, by fauna and flora, but also by human history. So it's also defined by social economy, political economy, and culture. It has a coherence to it. One of the key aspects of a bioregion is a sense of belonging. People find it easier to belong to landscapes, is what we've discovered here, rather than thinking that they belong to a municipality that doesn't necessarily follow the landscape. Where you are, maybe the municipality boundaries maybe do follow the divisions of the mountains and the rivers and so on, but certainly here, where I am in South Devon, in southwest England, they're not precisely like that. So the fact that we've defined our bioregion by water, that it runs from a very ancient boundary that was made in the 7th century between Devon and Cornwall in the west, and in the east with another river called the River Tean, which separates us off from East Devon, and in the north where our rivers rise on this very high land called Dartmoor and then flow down to the sea. So the sea is our southern boundary. And we are a mainly rural region with 2 urban areas inside. So why have we chosen this scale to work at? And what are the benefits? What's the potential of working at this scale? So one benefit we see is that it's a great scale for human organizing. In our bioregion, we can drive across in a car in about 2.5 hours in any direction. So we can know people, we can meet them face to face, we can go to meetings, we can go for a morning meeting, be back for lunchtime. And it's much more this feeling of kind of family, I suppose. We're creating a sense of belonging and relationships within the bioregion. And that's very important to emphasize, because bioregions or bioregioning are essentially a relational practice. And the fact that we're kind of thinking about all sorts of different kinds of relationship is also important. So we think about the relationship of humans with water, or humans with soil, humans with food, humans with housing. And a lot of the time, what we're seeing in the rise of interest in bioregioning internationally is this sense both of it being a very natural scale at which to organize, but also this sense of being in relationship to your river, or being in relationship to the sea, or being in relationship to your nearest urban center. This emphasis on relationship building is, I think, gold dust, because without those relationships, it's very hard for a region to respond to things like climate change. A lot of the work we're doing around climate adaptation is emphasizing this relationality, this ability to connect and relate. And through those connections and the relating, and through working with regenerative design, which I know, Oscar, you practice a great deal at resilience.earth, we're able to bring out this potential for really kind of working towards how a region could function at its best.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, that's really clarifying. In here in Catalonia, we have like a hot topic that it's water these days. Like we have a huge drought in the last 4 years that we don't see how it's going to get fixed, because the thing just seems to get worse and worse. And in many municipalities, their competences are a bit limited to be able to face that. And the more the climate change is approaching, at the same time, the more the different industries are extracting water from the aquifers, and both happening at the same time. And it's really difficult to manage that. Sometimes also we have an aquifer that goes across different municipal boundaries, and it's difficult to manage. How would you suggest to local municipalities to be able to face something like that? That in one way you have the climate change, that it's something so global, and in another way you have industries that are not limited to municipal boundaries, extracting these really important resource. How would you suggest a local municipality to face a challenge like that?
So first of all, a question back to you, just to check in. So who has responsibility for water? Is it municipalities themselves, or is it water companies?
Well, is public water, then that would go to the Generalitat de Catalunya.
And the municipalities nevertheless play some role in how the rivers are taken care of?
I guess a bit, but not so much. The Catalan Agency of Water, it's the one that has like the strong competency on water in general in Catalonia.
Very good. Okay, so that's very similar to what we have here. So we have a big water company called Southwest Water, and of course we have our municipalities as well. So in thinking about how we cope with drought and flood, so here we've got a flooding issue because we've been having a lot of storms recently and villages getting flooded. So this relates, we think, to climate literacy, and certainly the latest IPCC report that came out in April spoke a lot about climate literacy and making it possible for local communities to be able to be more engaged in thinking about how we manage these, what are called common pool resources, like water or the fertility of the soil or biodiversity. So to take water, so we've done a lot of work with water over the last 8 years. We are part of what's called a catchments partnership. So in the UK, we have a number of different water companies responsible for large areas. We also have central government, and we have the Water Framework Directive still, even though we're out of the EU. We have the Water Framework Directive, which directs water companies and municipalities to take care of rivers from source to sea. So to look at the whole system of the river. So of course, once you start to look at the whole system of a river, you're probably going to cross municipal boundaries. I mean, we certainly do with our rivers here in South Devon, because they rise up on Dartmoor, which is one area of jurisdiction, and then they flow down to the sea through another area of jurisdiction. It obviously is crazy to think that you're only going to take care of part of a river. So this kind of immediately gets us into the space of thinking about how do we work with whole systems and whole landscapes, and how do we take decisions within those landscapes and systems that are not just top-down decisions. So we've done a number of different things. So one of the first projects we did was, in fact, to create a charter for our local river, the River Dart, which gave the river moral rights. It has a right to flow from source to sea, not to be polluted, to be part of a healthy ecosystem, and so on. And to create the charter, we engaged about 1,000 local people who affirmed the wording for the charter and affirmed their role in relationship to the river as being stewards of the river. But other projects we've done, one of them was about drought. It was about how to encourage people to use less water. And again, that was a collaborative project. And we visited communities up and down our river to hold workshops with the communities to think through with them how we could manage drought, how we could use less water. So those are kind of two instances of kind of bringing people into relationship with the river. But the other aspect is that our water company, Southwest Water, is very keen to work with communities in order to do the work on the ground, realizing that it's impossible for a water company or in the Environment Agency or any other agency to be able to kind of notice what's going on the ground with water. And something really interesting has happened here in the last 3 years, which has been there's an explosion of activity of community groups springing up to take care of their local river. And although the original impetus was about pollution, so these local community groups now have become quite expert at measuring water quality and holding the water company and the Environment Agency to account when they find that the water quality is failing. We do see there's huge potential here for these groups to go further and to start to be the kind of go-to resource with the expertise and intelligence that's needed in order to be able to manage for drought and flood. And in order to be able to do that, as you know, Oscar, we've been talking quite a lot about data and how communities collect and gather data and how data is part of governance. This goes back to climate literacy. We want to make it possible for communities to understand both how water flows across a landscape when there's heavy rainfall, so what to expect when a flood's on its way, but also to be able to cope with drought as communities, not just as individuals.
Yeah, it seems like when I hear you talking, it feels like the time of greenwashing is over, no? Like that the governments cannot go along anymore with doing greenwashing politics, because now the challenges are real, and if they don't involve local communities, this just doesn't get fixed, right? Then
Yes.
But yeah, but the thing is, like, we have different municipalities, many of them actually led by women, that we're quite surprised that we feel like there's kind of a gender, like the change has gender. And these municipalities are trying to acquire more capacities to be able to face these challenges. What do you think, like, for the mayors or the people that are thinking about becoming mayors of their municipalities to run like the government from a different perspective? Which capacities do you think they need to get to be able to approach the processes that you were sharing?
That's a very good question. So one thing, before I launch into that, one thing I want to just kind of note is that what I see happening here in South Devon, and I'm sure it's happening in other places too, which is that civil society is remembering what its role is. It's remembering that it's not just there to vote in elections and to vote people into power in order to work for communities. It also has a role of holding to account and becoming much more informed about what is going on and being able to take action at the grassroots. So that's one, I think that's a reality. And I'm sure Catalonia has led the way in so many things. I mean, we look at Catalonia with great envy in a way, because you're able to do much more on the ground than we can because of the way your politics has been structured for so many years. But anyway, so here in the UK, we see that there's a real shift from government. So I'm talking both about a county level government. So that's kind of a big area of government and municipal government. Both of them are shifting towards recognizing that the issues of climate change are so great that they can't tackle them on their own. They can create strategies and zero carbon plans and so on, but it's impossible for them to create a team which is able to deliver on all the actions that need to be taken. So there is this kind of sense of a loosening up of government at all levels to be much more inclusive and to recognize that civil society has a role to play. So you talk about the kind of competencies that people going into municipal government might want to think about acquiring. And I think one of them is a design mind. So Oscar, you and I have been working a lot with regenerative design, but a design mind in general is able to embrace issues and problems in a really kind of creative and open way. In fact, I've got in front of me, I've pinned up above my desk, I've got, if you only remember a few things, you are a designer. Become more intentional about your design process. Be confident in your creative abilities. Be strategic about what needs attention first. Listen to your stakeholders and be inspired to design for them. So I think that is a very good place to start, this sense of kind of, we can all acquire this competency as designers. It's kind of, I think it's in most people, this ability to plan and design, but also recognizing that the challenge now is collaborative design. We're not just kind of designing from the top down. We need to kind of work from the bottom up and the top down. And a lot of the work that we do here at the Bioregional Learning Centre is in what we call the muddy middle. So I know you probably don't have a lot of mud in Catalonia right now. We've got a lot of mud in Devon. And so the middle is the kind of the space between policymakers and civil society. And we recognize that it's a space that needs bridging.
Yeah, and that when civil society becomes part of the public administration, there's like sometimes when you start the participatory process, people start saying many things that had been holding for a long while because they never been asked. And I think that the same happens when civil society becomes part of the administration, because then it's like there's rage. There's rage or frustration towards big industries that normally had been able to do whatever they want. And sometimes the reaction is to go against these industries. But we also need to be aware, I guess, that we cannot fight the industries for many reasons. One is that because they're bringing work, even if it's precarious, but if you go against them, you're gonna go against also the economy of your place. And if you don't have a design mind and you just fight against, then that's probably not going to be something regenerative for the whole region. Then I guess my question would be how civil society, organized civil society and public administration that had been harnessed by civil society can face a regenerative dialogue with big industries that are bringing work, many times precarious, but still work for the region, with big environmental impacts, to be able to generate a different type of relationship?
I think that partly goes back to what we've been discussing for some time between ourselves about data and governance. So this kind of civil society is wising itself up to what is the impact of over extraction, for instance, on rivers, or pollution in rivers. And also obviously many other aspects about biodiversity loss. So they're not passive any longer. And this sense of industry not being, it's not kind of floating in some, it's not floating like a mile above the ground. All industry is located in a place. And I think to help industry understand that it is part of a place, it's kind of, certainly from a bioregional perspective, of course, they're part of systems and landscapes, and making that clear to those industries. And while industries find it very difficult to change, they're stuck in a certain way of operating. There is this kind of fundamental issue about life support systems. So life support systems are absolutely fundamental to life. They are water and soil fertility and biodiversity and ecosystems and coast and marine health and so on. And I think there's more and more realization that it really is our duty as citizens of the planet to make sure our life support systems are healthy, because without them, we're not going to survive very long. So it's but it's definitely not about saying to the industries, we don't want you here, you're just kind of creating huge problems for us. It really is about bringing them into the conversation and working with them. I think even they recognize that the way they're operating can't go on forever, that public opinion is changing, and public opinion is a really powerful thing.
Then I guess the suggestion here is to see if the different municipalities could be able to get together to generate like a local observatory on the local resources that are enabling life to be in that place, and also kind of in a space where the different stakeholders can dialogue for a regenerative approach, trying to take out as much prejudices as possible. Would be something like that, what we're looking at?
I think that's part of it. I think that it's also about some kind of devolution of decision making. So then it comes back to on what are you basing your decisions? So yes, it comes back to this kind of sharing of information, of citizens being prime collectors of knowledge, of information, not just data, not just hard data, but observations about what's going on in the landscape or in society. Like, it's not just obviously about life support systems in terms of ecology, it's about life support systems in terms of public health and transport and housing and livelihoods. It's all of those things as well, which are all interlinked. So it's kind of giving a role to civil society, but it's not a passive role. I think the courageous municipalities, and I think in order to achieve what we need to be able to achieve, in order to combat climate change, municipalities are going to have to get braver. It is about devolving some decision-making down to community level and giving those communities some funding in order to be able to carry out the actions that they decide. So clearly it's kind of is not decision-making in a vacuum. There is dialogue between the municipality and what can happen at the grassroots with community groups or civil society. But it's definitely about the sense of kind of, this is such a huge existential issue that we're facing now. We've got to tackle it together. And tackling it together means thinking about loosening up the current structure of government. It's not about completely demolishing it at all, but it's definitely about loosening it up and making it work much more efficiently.
Yeah, we have to evolve democracy, definitely. And I heard you many times talk about that the indicators, the way we run them today, they're probably not good enough, and that we need to go towards life-based indicators, right?
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit about what's a life-based indicator?
So this is work that came out of the donut economic and ecological analysis that we did for Devon. So for people who don't know donut economics, it's something that has been taken up by municipalities around the world as a way to take a health check on the local economy and to see how it integrates with the planetary boundaries, you could call them, that are as they relate to that particular territory. And you can look up donut economics. But anyway, we, over a year in 2022, we pulled together a big collaborative across our county that online made this donut analysis for Devon. And in making that, we came up with a structure. And the structure was that we needed to think about the key scenarios that we wanted to shift in each domain. So a domain is something like income and work, or political voice, or housing, or river health, or coastal marine health, or land use change. And within each of those domains, we wanted to kind of think, what is the key scenario that if we could shift that scenario would actually shift the needle on that whole domain? For instance, we have a coast and we have a very important fishing port within our coastline called Brixham. And we decided that the key indicator for Brixham was bottom trawling. So bottom trawling is trawlers that go out and they simply scoop up everything that's on the seabed. And that practice emits more carbon per annum globally than aviation does, or releases it into the atmosphere. So we decided we wanted to try and see if it's possible to stop this practice. But then we went and talked to the harbour master, and he said that's not a great way to settle on a scenario or an indicator. A better way is to protect those marine areas. So instead, we decided the key scenario was to create highly protected marine areas, and the indicator would be related to that. So scenario, indicator, and then from that, we wanted to find the metrics that we would use for the indicator to be able to measure change in any direction. And then we wanted to be able, from that, determine pathways to action. And these pathways to action, as well as the indicators, in fact, would be on twin tracks. So you'd have parallel tracks. One track would be for civil society, and one track would be for municipalities and big business that we call the policymakers. And there would be obviously dialogue between the two. So the indicators which you're talking about, the kind of metrics for life, is kind of what supports life to flourish. So when you talk about life flourishing, it means like below what level, for instance, would the health of a river have to fall for it not to be able to support life? And obviously we don't want it to get it that far, but we need to be able to understand what the signs are when a river starts to fail very badly. So you get lack of oxygen, for instance, you get algal blooms, you get all sorts of things happening, obviously fish dying. So you begin to understand your river's not healthy and you need to do something about it. And you can create metrics and indicators for almost anything. But we wanted to make it possible for civil society to be able to measure those metrics and the indicators in order to be able to set bench lines and then to be able to take action. So I hope that answers more or less what you were asking.
Definitely. And it makes me think about also that we also talked about sometimes that it's not like now it seems that as a Western society, we're kind of completely lost our north. We don't really know where we're going, and we're looking at behind to see what indigenous communities have to say about what's going on, right? It's like the original people is what are they thinking about what's happening, and we also have a lot of that wisdom in our place, and there's many times like these popular says that make reference to a healthy state of the landscape, and that maybe recuperating those says, those ways of understanding the landscape from a healthy perspective from our elders, and translate that to indicators also could be a way of going.
I agree. I think there's a lot of wisdom. I'm sure there's a lot of wisdom in Catalonia because you have a lot of communities that are still very close to the land and have been working with the land for so many generations. We have that a bit, not so much as you perhaps, but certainly up on Dartmoor, we've got a lot of farmers families have been farming those farms for centuries, and they do understand the landscape very well. But we also need to remember that we're in a changing dynamic here because with climate change, we've got geosystems on the move. So we've got things happening that we've never seen before, like extreme floods or extreme droughts or all sorts of things, extreme warming. So our landscapes are responding in a different way. But this ability to read a landscape and understand how a landscape's responding by looking at the local trees and how they're adapting, or the local keystone species in the rivers, or whatever it might be, I think that's really important because we need to be able to, really kind of read what's happening and not live in this kind of never land of thinking that it's all going to be okay, because we need to be able to understand what's going on and be able to take action in a very reasoned way based on knowledge.
Yeah, and some days ago I was talking to my neighbor, and we were talking about the weather, and she was saying that her she's an elder, and she was sharing that her grandfather had to leave the farm because there was like a really long dry season in Catalonia, and that many farmers had to go to the towns because they couldn't not deal with that. And she was like, I guess this is not the first time that happened. Maybe no, if we go enough back into time, we can find places that are similar to what we're living and get a bit inspired by what they did in those times.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what they did was move, as you've pointed out. I mean, certainly, if we go all the way back to the Bronze Age, which is 4,000 years ago, on Dartmoor, when the Bronze Age came to an end, and the Bronze Age was really hot and sunny, we got the Iron Age, and it was a change of culture, partly because of the weather, because the weather got much wetter and colder. So they couldn't continue the lives and the kind of farming that they'd been doing up on Dartmoor. They had to come down into the lowlands and find a different way to farm. So it is all about adaptation.
And this is the call for today, no? We need to that and face that many things are going to change.
Yes, many things are going to change, and humans have been through this before. We've lived through many changes in the past millennia, many millennia.
Well, then, thank you so much, Isabel. I think this was great. And we may be gonna, ask you for another chat in the future to be able to go further into this as the municipalities start like facing this problem, that there's a lot of them that are really willing to, and probably we know that we're working parallel paths in different places of the planet. Then to keep these dialogues alive, it's really useful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Oscar. I really enjoyed it, and we're definitely going to keep this alive. Thank you so much.